In this video series, I'm going to go over all the factions in Infinity, their sectorials, and their general playstyle. I'll also be covering their strengths and weaknesses. There are much more in-depth videos and articles that you can read and watch. I'm linking some of the best ones below, but I always want more, so it would be a great help if you commented with your favorite pieces on faction rundowns in order to help new players decide what to play. This video assumes you already have some extremely basic knowledge of the game. If you know nothing about gameplay, the most important thing to know for this video are that sectorials are different from generic armies. If you play a generic army, also sometimes called a vanilla army, you're playing the entire faction's roster. You have more units to choose from and can therefore pick the best units for any mission. By contrast, playing a sectorial gives you a more focused and more specific set of options. You lose access to many units, but in exchange you get special profiles and access to fire teams. This video is aimed at new players, so I also won't be commenting on armies that are totally out of print. HAQQISLAM is a cool army, but they are made in like 2013 and most of their stuff is long gone. Alright, let's start off with PANOCEANIA's greatest strength and weakness is its technology. They have fancy camouflage, gigantic mecha, exciting heavy infantry, and the absolute best shooting in the game. Pano is very accessible because they are the best at sheer firepower. That firepower comes on light infantry, and medium and heavy infantry, and robots, and bigger robots. Their basic infantry are cheap and effective. Many of their units have mimetism, meaning that they're harder to hit. Many units also have hidden deployment, letting them appear out of nowhere to turn the tide of battle. They have the most tags, that is to say, tactical armored gear, those are the big mecha in the game, and they're all pretty good. Their weakness comes from that directness. They lack subtle control tools like mine layers and cheap camouflage units. Although they rely on hackable units like tags, they have relatively poor hackers. At best, they have good hacking defenses. PANOCEANIA wins by killing the enemy with all that technology and then completing the objective on a smoking, empty board. Troopers hailing from the water planet of Varuna give you a powerfully defensive army. They don't focus on heavy armor as much as they do an elastic defensive line, defense in depth. They have access to lots of camouflage and lightly armored units that wear the enemy down until parachutists like the Echo Bravo or tags like the Cutters can finish the job. Don't forget about the Kamau, an elite sniper that will be backed up by other light infantry for a punishing point of contact. The icy world of Svalarheima is the site of entrenched conflict, so the Svalarheima WINTERFOR is used to break the deadlock. They have almost as much variety as generic PANOCEANIA, but with more focus on heavier armor and more direct troops. Unlike the military orders, they don't really like fighting up close. They shoot from the back and the rear, winning trades with flexible fire teams while being harder to hit. Lethal snipers like the Nissi also keep the enemy at bay while you win the shootout. Playing an army of Space Knights is very, very cool. They have almost no cheap troops, instead relying on heavy and very dangerous power-armored knights to get the job done. They have strong close combat, and you'll fill the board with heavy armor and big, healthy boys. They have a few units like the Trinitarians for board control, but almost all of your points are going into elite troops that can be hard to use and painful to lose. They win with forceful assaults, outshooting your opponents and then tanking the damage with heavy armor and extra wounds. Those swords are not just for show. Military orders are very good in melee. However, they're best used for defense rather than a direct assault. Victory comes from discipline. Kill your opponent with measured aggression, keeping your troops alive and creating a pressure up in the front. JING is all about flexibility. They have a lot of units that can do a lot of things. Sometimes that makes those units overcosted since they pay for skills that they don't always need. But JING also doesn't have any notable weaknesses. JING have good hackers, good heavy infantry, good light infantry, good remotes, a good tag, good skirmishers, and good melee. They can do it all, and they can do it all pretty well. They're maybe the best faction for new players or players who want to try a little bit of everything. JING wins any way it can. You get to decide. They could be using a repeater network to lock down the opponent and shooting missiles at them from afar. It could be deploying Tiger soldiers in from space and having them obliterate their back line. It could be using ninjas to complete the mission while the opponent is distracted. JING can do it all. They're not even jack of all trades, master of none, they're just jack of all trades. They're great. The Invincible Army means that you'll play more powered armored troops than any other army in the game. Almost everyone on the board will have access to 2 wounds, almost everyone will have powered armor, it's fast as well as tough, it's just great. Their main issue is that they have fewer of those great control pieces that JING benefits from. They lack reactive turn options and durability in a strategic sense. That armor is plenty thick though. They're not short on firepower either. Invincible Army has access to unique heavy weapons and loads of missiles, all of which can ping down the opponent as you move your elite heavy troopers up the board to complete the mission. They're a great army with a gorgeous line of miniatures that is best used like a hammer, smashing against an anvil. ISS is the intel and special police force of the Emperor, with ornate armor and cybernetic Q hairstyles. They have access to cyber zombies like the Quangxi for explosive cannon fodder, decent hackers, and a bunch of cool tools like biometric visor and multispectral visor. Impersonators and smoke and camo tokens are all shut down by the investigators and secret police of the ISS. These tools, combined, are about negating any opponent who wants to use high-tech or tricky armies, which leaves their delicate and elite Imperial agents an opening to push buttons and get kills. White Banner Army is all about control and ambush on the cold world of Svalarheima. They have some of the best camouflage troops in the entire game. Is that marker a mine? Well, it could also be a heavy infantry, or a sniper. Could be any of those things. They're slightly harder to play because White Banner Army is also more fragile than Vanilla or the Invincible Army, but their surprise attacks can completely derail your opponent. They also have Warrior Monks for up-close fighting, which can also make devastating sneaky assaults. The core of the White Banner Army comes in half of the Kaldstrom box set, so they're strong as well as relatively easy to collect. ARIADNA play with guerrilla fighters, ambush troops, and glass cannons backed up by steel bricks. They've got loads of things like mines and infiltrators with shotguns and flamethrowers. They even have excellent parachutists who can come in the enemy's deployment zone to wreak havoc. If you like swords, yeah, they got swords too. Generic ARIADNA has some very good and very cheap melee monsters. The big downside is a lack of access to electronic warfare. If you want to kill a heavy infantry, the only way to do it is with conventional weapons. The same goes for stealthy units with mimetism. At best, you can wait for them to get up close and then shoot them with template weapons. ARIADNA's generic army excels at the shell game, and that's usually how they win. All those markers keep your opponent guessing, while you can use your elite specialists to complete buttons and take out exposed troops. Make good trades and go for the kill. ARIADNA is not the best for new players because you do need to know a bunch of special rules, but don't let that dissuade you. They're great and very accessible. USARF dropped the camouflage game for loads of basic, effective, and cheap units. Almost everyone has what other factions consider medium armor, and they're all totally undercosted. Like most Americans, they enjoy pyrotechnics, so they have loads of flamethrowers and rocket launchers. If they need to get up close, they've also got bikers and missiles like the Devil Dog. The downside is that they have almost zero fancy toys. Everything does exactly what it looks like. Sometimes you'll actually have difficulty spending all your army points because everyone is so cheap. There are no super soldiers with 3 wounds and specialist tools, but you can use a legion of medium infantry to even the odds against fancier armies. You should play them if you like the idea of winning with a few basic effective troops supported by some glass cannons. TAC troopers come from the borderlands of ARIADNA, and they undergo excessive training to become vicious gunfighters. The iconic TAC trooper is the Kazakh Spetsnaz, an elite light infantry unit that can operate as a camouflaged ambusher or as an airdrop threat. They have exciting snipers and really cool scouts, ideal for hunting down enemies in the forests. They also have lots of unique guns and tools that nobody else gets, like the Ochotnik bolt-action rifle or the Ratnik heavy-powered armor. I think that they're great for new ARIADNA players, and they actually play pretty similarly to vanilla ARIADNA. They breach and clear, like any contemporary Special Forces team, and use expensive and dedicated pieces to kill at range. ARIADNA has recently formed Kosmoflot as its space-based military arm. They fight in close-quarters battle using a bunch of ARIADNA's very best units. They get excellent forward troops for an incredible value. If there is a downside, it's that they still lack hacking, and that their fire teams are nothing special without relying on those named characters to keep them lethal. They play similarly to vanilla ARIADNA, with more focus on a few elite solo operators to win the day. HAQQISLAM have very lightly armored fighters, elite super soldiers, and a few tools that let them control the game table. Much like ARIADNA, they can fight a guerrilla war quite handily. HAQ value knowledge and medicine, so their doctors are easily the best in the game, and some of their troops can regenerate wounds on their own. Quite often, those same units are good at murder as well. If the doctors don't do it for you, then the cheap infiltrating guerrillas like the Delamir Hunzakut might work instead. HAQQISLAM's gunfighters are slightly worse than all the other factions. They're not bad, but very few of them win by outshooting the opponent. HAQQISLAM thrives on asymmetric warfare. You want to create unfavorable unit trades, shooting Panzerfausts from hidden and disposable troopers, then making attack runs with troopers that you don't mind losing. HAQ wins by controlling the game. Their troops can die, but then keep on coming back to provide attack runs and cover fire. Their forward units like Ghazis disrupt the opponent's lines. And of course, they have access to the Fidei for assassination runs. But if you want to play with lots of Hassassins, then you might as well play... If PANOCEANIA is a sword and ARIADNA is an axe, HB is a scalpel. They surgically remove units, but not with hidden snipers or camouflaged bombs. If you don't kill publicly, after all, it's a murder and not an assassination. Hassassins instead use unique tools like the Fidei, which start off appearing as friendly units in your opponent's deployment zone. They also have some very dangerous, irregular fighters like the Ghazis, good hackers like the Barid, and viral sniper rifles on the Lasik. The downside is that most of these are glass cannons. They're hard to play and have unique rules. You win by eliminating your opponent's best units one at a time, at the same time as your specialists complete objectives. But this also means you need to know your opponents pretty well too. I play Hassassins and I love them and I do recommend them, but if you're a real beginner, I might instead suggest... Super soldiers are cool. RTF has lots of super soldiers. Their troops are filled with simple but effective special rules, forward deployment, extra wounds, and even more amazing doctors. Ramah Task Force has a lower skill floor and lower skill ceiling than the Hassassins or vanilla. They also get the gigantic spider tank, which is really good and really dangerous. On the downside, they don't have the scalpels of the assassins and fewer special tricks. You don't get a single regular camouflage trooper in RTF, so your control is no longer the shell game, it's all about the angles and maneuvering. They win with agile ninja-like troops that run up walls and super jump to win the scenario. Many of their troops actually have lots of great abilities. Their doctors can super jump. Their specialists can dodge really well. Their hackers can show up in the enemy's rear. You can also use the Magariba Guard as a physical threat. Nomads are incredibly powerful. When you play the inhabitants of the Nomad motherships, you're playing with what some consider to be the best faction in the game. Many units are multifunctional. You get doctors with melee weapons, hackers who are also lieutenants, tags that have a smaller, angrier guy inside them. It's all good. However, you can't just take what you want. You always get a unit with some luggage. But that's hardly a drawback. Many of these abilities are exceptionally good. Nomads have high stats all around, but they're easily the best faction at hacking in the entire game. It's not just that their hackers are good, it's the tools that they have to extend their repeater network. It's legendary. No other army can threaten the board with guided missiles or brain hacks quite like the Nomads. Living in space means building redundancies, so they have access to a little of everything, including some close combat troops. They're a bit lacking in high tech compared to PANOCEANIA, ALEPH, and the Combined Army though. Their visor options are not the best, and their troops should not try to outshoot their PANOCEANIAN counterparts. But they make up for it by locking down their opponents with variety and hacking, allowing them to win while the enemy is busy cowering from missiles and trying to avoid your info war game. Corregidor is a ship of miners and mercenaries. They value hard work and flexibility. Signature units like the Wildcats take the Nomad philosophy of plasticity to heart, and their fire teams frequently feature a wide variety of pretty decent abilities. They have some strong close combat options for cheap, with Morans and Jaguars and named mercenaries to absolutely devastate the front line. Just take a look at the Evader. It has basically every good ability in the game, but no special tricks like combat jump. The Corregidorans are a direct people and a direct army, with strong and other straightforward units like intruders. If they have a weakness, it's in their command structure. They have no chain of command, and none of their lieutenant options are super good. Losing your LT is easy and can be costly. However, aside from that, Corregidor is very good for new players. It's also available in the brand new 2-player Crimson Stone Battle Box. Bakunin is filled with Christians, anarchists, scientists, free thinkers, criminals, dissidents, freaks, and edgelords. These categories are actually not mutually exclusive, by the way, which is how you get to use bioweapon teams like Pupniks in the same army list as Christian battle nuns. They have well-equipped fighters like the Riot Girls, and their various observance units, those are the priests, tend to do the work, but they also excel in close combat. They've got Morlocks and Uberfall Commando. They're cheap, capable, and very cool. Bakunin has a number of neat tricks and nice abilities, relying on mimetism and good weaponry over armor and wounds. Their downside is similar to Corregidor. Their social structure is reflected in their command options, most of them being the fairly vulnerable Revan units. Bakunin suffers when the enemy has a powerful singular strategy that they didn't prepare for. Compared to many other factions and especially sectorials, Bakunin can bring a very cheap and very diverse set of tools to every game, letting the scientists figure out what the best way to defeat the enemy is on the fly and bringing that to bear. Tunguska is an anarcho-libertarian paradise that would make Ayn Rand swoon. They eschew the nonsense and flexibility of other nomads in favor of raw firepower. Their line infantry are pricey but effective. Their Hollowmen super jump around with fearsome weaponry. Hecklers isolate and disrupt enemy lines. The Interventor is an uncompromising and unbeatable hacker. If Bakunin and Corregidor feature plenty of part-time soldiers, Tunguska does not. Their troops are professional and you pay for it. This makes them easier to play than some factions. Their board control focuses on the back line and midfield, so you can use your attention on the vicious Krits of Borak and even the Salamandra, which has the biggest gun of the entire game. They win with good armor and even better application of force. Combined Army players enjoy some of the best forces in the game. Playing generic CA means having access to some truly audacious tools like the Avatar. It's the strongest unit in the game, and it's also going to be 30% of your entire army. The same can be said of other gigantic monstrosities, like the Karanteds or the Anathematics. Playing as aliens means breaking the rules. You'll have access to all sorts of weapons that nobody else has, like Sepsiders and plasma weapons and morphoscan troops. Only play CA if you can deal with an overwhelming amount of variety, power, and special rules. If they have a weakness, it's the difficulty in using these units as well as their high cost demands. You have to teach yourself to be very aggressive, or End Boss Eddie over here is going to be just a bunch of wasted points. Combined Army wins by using these truly overwhelming weapons to bring the enemy to their knees. The rest of your options are also incredible, but if you're playing generic, you're going to be using these monsters like the Avatar or Skiavoros. If you don't use them, you might as well be playing Shots is maybe the hardest faction in the game to win with, but they're really hard to defeat. That doesn't mean they're bad, but they require mastery of complicated special rules and how to effectively use them. But if you do know how to use them, you'll run circles around your opponent. Nearly every unit can deploy in camouflage state or from the skies. Their tag is difficult to see until it kills you. Their most basic troops can start off as threatening pings on the radar. They can impersonate the enemy, sowing confusion just like the Hassassins. That's how they win. They create chaos in the lines and keep your opponent from stabilizing. But how they lose should also be now evident. They do have firepower, but they have far less, and they're pretty lacking in armor or doctors. They're not too difficult to pick up. A big re-release a few years ago brought them into the modern era, and board games like Defiance come with a number of excellent Shasvaasti models. Morats do not retreat. They don't panic. They're angry guerrilla lizard men, and they want you to know that they're coming. You throw artillery and fireballs with the Sogarat and Yaugats, then they use shock troops like the Hungries and Dotarazi to close the gap. They have almost zero subtlety. If you like the idea of controlling your opponent with hackers or markers, well, look elsewhere. They move forward with obvious lieutenants and unyielding infantry. The problem? Well, you're moving forward with obvious lieutenants and unyielding infantry. If you make a frontal assault, you're still likely to lose. Morats are a hammer, but you have to know when to swing. Swing too late, and you'll lose the mission. Swing too early, and you'll waste these expensive troops with nothing to show for it. They also have a tag that has a dead animal on its back, so they're pretty cool. Onyx use mysterious diplomats and agents like the Umbra Legates to slash throats in aggressive maneuvers. OCF is not at all lacking in weaponry. Their elite units have lethal firepower, backed up by excellent close combat. They also get big, terrifying robots. They get decent fire teams too. Overall, they're a lot like playing generic combined army, but with fire teams. They accentuate and heighten all the strengths and the weaknesses of vanilla combined army. You can't take the avatar, but you have access to an entire fire team of mecha with the overdrawn Batroids. However, that is also their downside. There are almost no cheap troops. Your stuff has to be either incredible killing power or almost no killing power like the Amitron, with very little room in between. ALEPH doesn't have good technology. That's because ALEPH is technology. They have an incredible variety of very powerful tools that excel at controlling the game state. Mimetism is plentiful, meaning that you're always harder to hit. NWI and extra wounds also mean you're harder to kill. Those defensive tools also make ALEPH lethal on the offense. All ALEPH armies have access to ludicrously powerful personalities like the Asura or Achilles. They're smaller than a Gundam, but they fight just as well. If you're afraid of your powerful heavy infantry getting hacked, don't worry, ALEPH also has some of the best hackers in the game. Much like the combined army, many units are very expensive. It's a real weakness. You'll have to make do with unarmed support units to help generate orders, since so many of your points are going to be tied up in fearsome fighters like the Posthumans, Penthesilea, or Dart. ALEPH wins by dominating the opponent from multiple attack angles. You just have too many attack vectors to shut down all at once, and you apply a pressure all over the board so they can never quite bring their good guns to bear. Generic ALEPH has Myrmidons out front and snipers in the back, and hackers all the way around. Quick warning though, many very strong units in vanilla ALEPH are actually from Steel Phalanx, which are all out of production, and it can be a little tough to find. OSS work on domestic threats against infrastructure and fight rogue AIs, so many of their models are a bit more subtle. The Asura is small, but she can outfight and outhack a small army all on her lonesome. Lots of units have NWI for extra wounds. They have low armor, lots of mimetism, and are mechanical. That means bringing lots of robots, and robots are actually very easy to repair. All of those factors make OSS subtly resilient and hard to dislodge. Their weaponry is exceptional, especially on the posthumans. You pay half the points for a model with twice the guns. The downside is that they don't really have any cheap troops. The Devas are very expensive in the high 20 range. The Dakini TAC bots are in the mid-teens. Sure, you can take the Lamed Rebots or the Netrods, but these are not really going to be posing much of a threat. The other downside is the lack of close combat troops. Although many OSS units do have access to template weapons for CQB, only one model has any martial arts mastery, and none of them have any kind of smoke grenades to help cover ground. You'll have to win by controlling the game with fancy tricks and toys. Hit them before they hit you. There is no generic non-aligned army. These armies represent smaller nations, mercenaries, and independent factions. All of them are kind of difficult to play since they draw on models and miniatures from multiple lists. They're the best if you already play one faction and want to branch out. All NA2 lists also rely on fire teams, so you need to know the advanced rules to play them effectively. But don't let that stop you, seriously. All of them are neat, all of them are at least decent. They're worth looking at for the model line. Even beginners can pick up and win with mercenaries, don't be too intimidated. DBS was the first NA2 to be released, coinciding with the Outrage manga. The stars of the show are the Druze themselves. They're pricey, but effective medium infantry that can take a bewildering number of weapon options. Their strength lies in being potent midfield combatants. Every Druze trooper packs multiple options for a fight. They've all got templates and powerful pistols and excellent support weapons, although this all comes at a cost. They're backed up by brawlers and mixed fire teams that can cover the map in interesting attack vectors. The other main feature are all the ancillary units. Druze get access to a number of profiles normally not seen in other armies. The Anacondas and Scarface are some incredibly good mercenary tags. Ninjas like Saito Togan and Kunai work with a Hunzakud to complete objectives and cause chaos up close, while the Druze in the midfield breach and clear. Bounty hunters can show up everywhere. Honestly, a lot of these mercenary options end up overshadowing the actual Druze models. And that is the weakness, I think. You don't have that much flexibility, and what you do have relies on the Druze shock troopers to be effective. If they crumble, they're your base, your order pool, and your game generally crumbles with it. JSA used to be part of JING, so they have models like the remotes in common. However, they share very few miniatures after their civil war, and they've replaced JING's flexibility with a lethal alpha strike. JSA are glass cannons, capable of incredible damage in many different ranges. Strong missile teams shoot them from afar. The Ryukin operate in the front and rear to hinder and cause mischief. One of the most exciting tools is the Domaru Fire Team, a full squad of heavily armed and armored samurai that can obliterate foes in close combat or mid-range. The downside is that JSA is really built for overcomplicated frontal attacks. Even their controlled units, like the Ryukin or Oniwaban, are designed around a powerful alpha strike. You don't take JSA to win with attrition, or to hack, or to control, or to snipe. You set up your moment with all your special tools, then you go in for the kill. Ideally, by the time your opponent tries to counterattack, they're already dead. Ikari Company uses many units from JSA and JING. They're a bit tough to use and collect because their models are all over the place. It's perfect if you played JSA or JING back in 2nd edition. They're a less subtle JSA. Waves of unruly soldiers like desperados usually charge ahead to soften the enemy up. Ikari also get access to the Yuan, airdropped mercenaries with random equipment and bad attitudes. They do have some lovely heavy infantry to go with the chaff, so they can defend as well as attack. The thing that they lack most of all is specialists, button pushers. It's tough to complete the missions when you have very few powerful doctors or engineers or hackers, and not even a lot of other good observers. So, if you want to play Ikari Company or JSA, make sure to pick up the JSA Army box first. StarCo features several characters from the Outrage manga, who should be released sometime in October 21 as separate models. StarCo uses Nomad models as a base, backed up by a variety of specialized mercenary models like Raoul Spectre and Emily Handelman. The best arguments for StarCo? Special characters. Emily can lead a game into victory by spam firing her custom grenade launcher. Senior Massacre works with Corregidor and troops to get in close and then kill an entire room while covered in smoke. You get some unusual choices too, like Anaconda Squadron and Highlander Catarans. The main issue I have is that many of these models don't have synergy, so you have to get good at the game to have a chance. Collecting them all is also a real pain since they're all from different factions. This one is best for experienced players. If you happen to buy Operation Ice Storm, well, this one's also for you too. Spiral Corps represents the remnants of the Toha, so some of their model range comes from the now discontinued Toha army line. They inherit the biggest strengths and weaknesses of the Toha, but being a mercenary company, they also add in some new options like brawlers. Their biggest strength is their unique fire team triad. Spiral Corps can have numerous small 3-person fire teams running around, and some of them can even be as strong as the 5-man fire teams. They're flexible, elastic, and dangerous. If this wasn't enough, Spiral also gets impersonators like HAQQISLAM to really control your opponent's opening. Unique tools like the Symbiont Armor and Symbiomates also mean that your opponents might not just understand what you're doing until it's too late. For all these reasons, avoid this if you're a new player, unless you really like reading unique rules. Play to lock down your enemy like HAQQISLAM or ARIADNA, but they do it in a different way, with organic technology instead of hackers. Even if you like being special, Spiral requires lots of finesse. If you want to play them, pick up the Spiral Corps Army box. Foreign Company makes their money off their reputation, so they have to look good while winning. Forco uses loads of named characters, including many from Aristea like Hannibal and Wild Bill. Many of the other units also use equipment from PANOCEANIA or the NOMADS. The best part is striking forward with loads of those unique and flashy light and medium guys. Those named characters can fulfill the roles of several lesser units. You might not get great paramedics, but who cares? Instead, you get Avicenna. You don't have intruders, but you get Lakshmi. Many of these special characters actually exist to support your real killing power, well-armed infantry like orc troops and Kaplans. On the downside, you're not going to get that many special tricks. No impersonators, minimal hidden deployment, and very few airborne guys. The cameras are watching, and there's very little glamour if you can't show it off in your army list. Dashat Company is mostly HAQQISLAM, with a few JING heavy infantry suits that were bought by the Silk Lords. They're not very silky in practice. Dashat has some of the best options for rough murder missiles in the entire game. Kumbikers, McMurrow, Libertos, Bashi bazooks, and more. That's great. That's the problem though. Dashat is built on the backs of these irregular killers, but they also need lots of regular orders to power their heavy units like the Magariba Guard or Zuyongs. Balancing both sides of the equation is tough, but they can make for a very aggressive force capable of beating any matchup. I suspect that White Company exists so that people who bought the Kaldstrom 2-player box wouldn't split it with a friend. All of the units in the Kaldstrom box are great for Whiteco, but Whiteco has a few of its own features too. They have access to Jujak fire teams, which are incredible, and a number of very interesting wildcard fire team options to boot. They often perform humanitarian missions to defend human outposts. As such, many of their models are really well equipped to control the midfield, operating up close and keeping the enemy from letting you into your back line. High Dow units see through smoke with MSV2 and can snipe from miles away, safe and secure in heavy armor. White Company also has access to lots of repeaters to form a strong hacking network, so they can control and defend well enough. Ultimately, I think they're just great for new players. Lots of forgiving models and plenty of options make the White Company good if you want to play a mercenary army. Grab the Kaldstrom 2-player box to start. O12 is a collection of 12 bureaus that oversee humankind. They are the authority. They're the United Nations, and the League of Nations, and even the International Postal Union all combined into one. They're the best at what they do. The Razor unit? Well, the Razor unit's one of the best infiltrating hidden units in the game. The Gangbuster? Well, it's one of the best midfield speed bumps in the game. The Omega unit? Come on, you see where I'm going. O12 has above average stats in most of their models, and many of them are even equipped for rapid response. They have access to lots of really cool airborne infiltrators. Lots of them have great armor and extra wounds, and many of them even have non-lethal glue shotguns for fighting up close. So, what's the downside? Each of the units is good and straightforward, and not great at doing other things. HAQQISLAM has heavy infantry doctors. JING has a super jumping tag. O12 does not. O12 is great for beginners, because each model does what it says, and does it well. It's also not a boring faction to play, because it does have lots of nuance, but you have to make sure that each unit is being used as befitting its training. Do that right, and you can win one for the boys in blue. If you want to play O12, buy the Operation Wildfire box or the O12 Action Pack. Space is dangerous, and Starmada is a special arm of O12's peacekeeping forces. Vanilla O12 has lots of units with climbing plus. Almost every unit in Starmada has some kind of mobility training so you can run on walls and airdrop from behind, getting to tactically beneficial vantage points. Starmada is trained for close quarters battle. While they aren't melee powerhouses, they thrive in close and mid-range gunfights. They're available in the newly released starter box, which is actually a very good purchase for O12, even if you don't plan on playing Starmada specifically. Alright, that's it. That's all the armies that are currently in production. If you are a new player and this helped you decide, I would love to hear your choice in the comments below. If you're a veteran player, hey, there's a good chance that there are some new players here. Give them a little advice, especially on choosing an army. And if there's anything you want to correct me on, be my guest. Thank you all for your support. Catch you next time.